Yeah, you know what this video is about. Before we get into this, I know that I've reached 500 subscribers, and honestly, it's a very big goal for me, and I want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you all very much. But I want to do a Q&A, but I don't have enough questions, so please leave me questions. Yeah. Anyway, let's begin. Like many of the stock primaries, I can't really give this one a specific stereotype. It's either they're really good, or they're really bad, or they're in the middle. Another reskin that actually sees some use for a change. Very rarely though. And if it is, it's probably strangified. Just like the Big Bite, it's another primary reskin for Trooper. Some people use it, some people don't. Yeah, but the fact that it's a strange drop really ups the fact that it gets used. And I know the rockets fire from the middle of the screen, so it's technically different from stock, but let's be honest, it doesn't really make much of a difference. The aerial bomber is a really viable weapon. It's kind of sad that no one uses it unless they're using a para bomber or they have a contract, so it's just not used. The increased clip size allows for insane amounts of rocket jumping that's probably really fun, but no one uses it. And if they do, it's to a poor extent. This thing's a crutch. Alright, fine, I'll talk about it. The troopers that use this are just way too worried about dying, most likely using the conch along with it, and maybe even having a pocket medic. Now yes, health on hit on anyone is great, but if you're playing trooper, you can just easily rocket jump to a health pack. Or if you're using the escape plan, you can use that. Even if you do want an extra bit of health, the conch works just fine, and there's enough health packs on the map, so I gotta say, the troopers that use this, they're pussies. The only times I really see this being used is if they're using the PDR and the whip with it, or they're using a banner. Other than that, it's not really used. And it's kind of sad because it's actually a pretty viable weapon, much like the aerial bomber. The direct hit is one of those weapons that are very wild in its stereotype because it's very skill dependent. You've got the airshot gods hitting every airshot seamlessly, and then there's the ones that can't hit rockets on a non-moving target. But most of the time, they're in the middle, hitting decent shots and occasionally hitting air shots, but ultimately missing most. The direct hit but for tryhards, or people who bought it from the daily shop. Most of the time, newer players are using this, mainly because they think the extra rocket is overpowered, and it's not their fault to think the double trouble is viable. Heavy asterisks. If they're using this unironically, it's probably because they're bad. If they're using it and they know it's bad, they're probably just memeing. The G-Bomb is in a very weird spot. It's alright sometimes, and other times it's not. And it really isn't used much outside of people trying to troper with a different option. I mean, it's fun as hell to rocket jump with, don't get me wrong. But if they're actually using it to try to win, on the other hand, yeah, they're not gonna get very far. Not without help, at least. After using the Mobile Menace bundle a while back, I can definitely see why a lot of troopers use this. More mobility is fantastic for trooper, allowing for a more aggressive hybrid trooper, but there's also the troopers that use it for its extra rocket and not its mobility. And it's not bad, they're simply just not making the most of the extra push force like G-Bomb users or the hybrid troopers that use this. The rocket jumper is very obviously used by one type of people, troopers, never playing hybrid or stock trooper and only trying to get gardens, and honestly I don't blame them. Rocket gardening is insanely easy in this game. If you didn't watch my niche weapons video, then you probably don't know my love for the Wrecker's Yard, but don't worry, you don't have to watch it, but you totally should. The special overload mechanic can allow for crazy plays with rocket jumps. It's just a shame that whenever somebody does use it, they probably die. I don't see this very often unless they're doing it for a shotgun contract on Trooper. Or they're using the Boonie Blaster and the Tunnel Rat. The shotgun just isn't used much, and it's not because it's bad, it's just that Trooper has way better options in his arsenal that can help him. No, not that arsenal. Why use a shotgun when he can take 60% less blast damage and fall damage? Or use any of his banners? It's not a bad choice for damage output, but if you want to help your team out, this isn't the best pick. And yet people still decide to use it. Shocking. Jesus Christ, not this again. It's a reskin that isn't used. Even after this was put in the daily shop rotation, I still barely see this. But I will put the fact that mine is named Furry Gun. Just like the shotgun, this isn't a bad pick, but it's just outshined by Trooper's other choices in a secondary slot. Although it is used more than the shotgun on Trooper, so I'll give it that. Much like the Bulletstormer, this isn't used often, and definitely less than the shotgun itself, typically being used on classes other than Trooper. Now this is the shotgun of choice for Trooper. I see this way more than any other secondary on Trooper, other than the gunboats. Hell, I see Trollpers swapping out man-treads for these sometimes. It's definitely a good pick for finishing off targets that didn't die to a garden, or killing an arsonist that knows how to air blast. And now we're dipping back down again, because like many of the other Trooper shotguns, it's just not used all too much. And much like the Frankenstein, it's more likely used on arsonist or mechanic. This guy hates Trollpers, or sticky jumping annihilators, or anyone really. I mean, what else can you do if someone is rocket jumping at you? Oh, right. Screw it. Let's just send this dude miles away with hit scan. The Boonie Blaster, like I previously mentioned, is only really used with a friendly fire foiler, but it does see some use outside of that, being absolutely devastating with crits. It kinda sucks that the people that do use this are aim gods, because holy shit the damage output is good. No one really uses this unless they're memeing, and it's not too bad if you can aim, but it's not really as reliable as Trooper's other secondaries. Also, I want to mention that I have a collector's one, so thought that was cool. Yeah, editing me, since the patch, it's actually insanely good, so what I just said, ignore everything but the collector's part. The Battalions is a very good pick if you just want to fuck over the enemy team, or if you just want more health. The people that use this are very aware of how powerful it is against marksmen and crits doctors, so don't underestimate them. It's also meta in bosses, so yeah. The buff banner is probably one of the most used secondaries next to the boot items. Mini crits for 8 seconds is nothing to scoff at, especially if the Trooper's team is well coordinated. But it is TC2, so take that how you will. It's also very good passive-wise, letting you shoot and reload faster, allowing for better damage output. So if you see someone running this, they mean business. A newer addition to Trooper's backpack, and it's yet another reskin. It's not a bad one though, not at all. It's mostly the same stereotype for the buff banner, but it really depends on if it's genuine or not. I don't see many Troopers running this, and it's a shame because it's really fun to use. The health regen isn't too bad, and the speed boost is really good. If someone's using this, they're probably really tired of dying and just needed a little help in that department. But other than that, it's just not used too often. No one really uses this, and it's only really used by newer players and aerial bomber users. There's just so many better options in Trooper's backpack that he doesn't really need this, and it's really shown by no one using it. This is a staple for most hybrid Trooper loadouts, and for good reason. Less fall damage and less self-blast damage is fantastic if you still want mobility and damage, rather than giving up one or the other. So if they're using this, they definitely mean business. Typically used by full-on soldiers, along with the rocket jumper and the market gardener, or someone's using it with a reload speed buff for, I don't know, every other rocket launcher that can deal damage. This actually isn't a bad pick. The deploy speed buff helps when you're in a pinch, but it kinda sucks compared to all of other troopers and melees that support him better than stock. But some people do use this, so mad respect. Just like the flanker stereotype, if you have this, you're really lucky, so congrats. Remember in flanker stereotypes how it said this is only used if it's strange? Yeah, that still applies here. No one really uses this, and it's kinda sad, because you can still get it from the achievements and bosses. But there's also the other fact that it's only for 3 classes, which really limits its usability. It's not bad looks-wise, as I said, but just being a stock reskin, there's always better choices. Only if it's strange. I gotta get Camo Camper on here and do something, I have no idea. Dude, that's the thing. He's like one of the only ones that have this, so, hi Camo Camper, if you're even watching this. And like last time, this is very rare, but very cool. Also, hello again, Jessaf. Thank you very much for the clips. This is really used by people who just want to support their team, wanting them to get to the front lines and... Who am I kidding? They whip marksmen and say, get back to work. They're so... It's not funny. Stop it. This isn't too common of a pick, but that doesn't mean it's bad. The extra damage can be clutch sometimes, and the self-knockback could allow for some cool rollouts, but more often than not, you'll see them killing themselves trying to do something cool. Or they just miss the melee entirely. This is a more common trooper melee, being a main state if you want to be an offensive trooper. The guys that use this are aware of how good the speed boost can be on any class, but especially trooper, using rocket jumps in the escape lane for escapes when needed, or pushing in when needed. Just don't underestimate them if they're using this. Trust me. This is used a lot, just not in a good way. It's either used on a mode that doesn't need a +1 cap rate, or they're on defense, making the upside of 10% speed kinda worthless because you don't have to cap anything. This is more used on Annihilator rather than Trooper, but it does still see some use, probably among Troopers that struggle to stay alive long enough to be any support to their team.
Imagine not having the Rising Sun Katana. Fucking loser.
You thought, didn't you? You thought you could kill me? Think again, numbnuts?
P.S. This is just a joke.
This is probably one of the most used trooper melee, like, ever, and for good reason. Being able to one-tap light classes is fantastic when it works. This weapon has gone through countless nerfs and buffs, but mostly nerfs. The main nerf being that now you only do 108 if you're going slow and not 135 all the time, which is honestly really stupid, but it's still used very often by troopers and hybrid troopers alike. This is the melee you want to use if you want to be an asshole. Or if you're playing bosses because it's meta since the katana was disabled a while back. And that's all of Trooper's weapons. Arsonist is next, so if you have any stereotypes, feel free to share. Like I said earlier, we hit 500 subs not too long ago, so I'm really thankful for that. And I'll do a Q&A as soon as I have enough questions. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.